My name is Joe. I'm an estuary project officer working with the Tees Rivers Trust. And I'm going to be running you through primarily our seagrass nursery and restoration work. Yeah. So next slide, please. So firstly, a bit about us. We are the Tees Rivers Trust. We work across the Tees catchment area using a sort of source to sea approach to upstream management. We are generally aiming to improve water and habitat quality across the region. And in the estuary team, which I'm a part of, we focus on, well, the estuary. It's an area that's been massively degraded from its past extent and quality. In fact, we've lost about 95% of the intertidal habitat in the area to industry and development and pollution and things like that. To address these kind of issues, we're aiming to restore seagrass meadows, oyster and mussel reefs, and provide some areas of refugia, which we call fish hotels, which is quite fun. But today we're running specifically through the seagrass work because that's sort of my area of expertise. Next slide, please. So, what is seagrass? Most of the time when I tell my sort of family members or whatnot about what I do for work, they kind of stare at me blankly. They don't know what seagrass is. I imagine a lot of people in here know fairly well, but I'll give a sort of brief overview. So seagrass or seagrasses are an amazing family of plants, of which we have two primary species in the UK, that being Zostra marina and Zostra noltii. Zostra marina being the primary subtidal species, and noltii being the mainly intertidal species, subtidal being below the low tide line, and intertidal being between the low and high tide line. It's a little bit of a lie because marina does go into the sort of intertidal area and noltii a bit into subtidal, but that's roughly the same. Roughly the distinction, noltii being the smaller one, marina being the larger one, which we primarily work with. These plants are marine angiosperms, which is quite special. They are the only marine flowering plant. Flowers aren't that impressive, but it's still very cool. And they form massive, dense meadows that used to wrap around a large part of the country, really. Anywhere there was the sort of suitable mud or sand at the right depth, there pretty much used to be seagrass. But next slide, please. But why do we care? So the meadow forming habits I mentioned just then go a massive way in the effort to minimize coastal erosion. They stabilize sediment through their sort of living root mass. They also, physically is the wrong word, physically pull down sediment from the water column through abating wave action. And via that abating wave action, also minimize the waves' impacts on, say, there's a cliff behind them or something, literally making, well, stronger shores, you know. They pull in a massive amount of carbon from the atmosphere. The precise amount is currently being worked out in sort of academia and reports and things like that. But we know that in American species, which are pretty comparable, they pull in more than the Amazon rainforest per meter squared. So they're pretty good. But personally, even without these two amazing benefits, the negating coastal erosion and the carbon sequestration, I think their habitat provisioning qualities, it should make everyone care about them. They provide really important nursery grounds for important fish stocks. Recently read something from Cardiff Uni about cod and pollock really heavily relying on them. Those are obviously very economically and just, you know, food-wise very important fish stocks. And something like a fifth of the sort of the major fish stocks around the world rely on seagrass meadows in some way. So really important in that sense. They're feeding grounds for migrating birds, sharks and rays use them, countless invertebrates scuttle amongst them. The really, really hot spot. Next slide, please. So all that positive, sort of nice things sounds a bit sad when we look at the global decline the sort of family of plants has experienced. About a 30% decline globally, and feasibly up to a 95% loss of seagrass in UK waters. These numbers are a bit hard to pin down. The seagrass beds were never really surveyed that well. That they were so abundant, and it's just grass everywhere. People don't survey grass, that we don't really know what the extent used to be. And to be honest, we're still finding little patches now, sort of hanging on. So the numbers not exact, but we've lost a lot basically. This decline globally and in the UK has been attributed to a wide range of factors. Disease such as seagrass wasting disease, pollution, that being oil slicks, plastic, nutrient runoff from farms, which goes into eutrophication. Then you got disturbance, bottom trawling, obviously terrible for these kind of plants. Someone dragging their anchor through them, things like that. And then climate change. They're pretty hardy plants in terms of temperature variation, but they're not, if it gets too warm, they will get upset and get covered in algae. It's not good. Next slide, please. So to give you a sort of idea of just how abundant this used to be, because we can talk, 40% or whatever, but what does that mean? This is a not fishing fleet, a harvesting fleet rather of Danish seagrass harvesters. Fleet of boats. They go out to a sort of a shallow bank somewhere, anchor up, and they'd go out in waders and use scythes to cut through meadows and harvest seagrass, which we used for, next slide, thatching these houses. I don't entirely know why they didn't just use terrestrial grass, which is already dry. You don't have to dry it out, but I'm not a thatching expert, but they used to use it for this stuff. It was everywhere. But so next slide after that tangent. Honing back into the sort of local side, massive UK-wide decline, but in the Tees specifically, last record we had of seagrass was in about the sort of late 60s. This primarily due to just an immense amount of estuary habitat loss, 93% decline in the last like 150 years. Really, really bad. The older map you see on the side there, even that extent is too small. Even that's been reclaimed by farmland by we got Dutch engineers to do it or something. So that wasn't enough. And then we had heavy industry come in, big concrete blocks, big factories, massive dredging operations, lost most of our tidal habitat. This does, however, mean we are, I think, the only project in the country attempting to bring back seagrass in a complete reintroductive sense. We have no donor beds. There's none left. It's all gone. Makes it harder, but makes it a lot more interesting, I think. Next slide, please. If I get mine to load. So what can we do about this? We've been over the decline. As I said before, we don't have a donor bed, nothing left in the Tees. So we have to go off to a donor bed somewhere and collect some seeds, which we'll talk about later. Collect the seeds, plant the seeds in the nursery that we run, pray that they grow, and then plant either those fully grown plants or the seeds they produce into the estuary and hope it works out. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. To sort of go into detail about that a bit more because it's quite complex. Travel to the nearest donor site. This is usually for us Lindisfarne, which have been very nice over the years. Let us go and collect spathes, which are pea pods of seagrass seeds, essentially. Little long housing with little seeds. You sort of get up to maybe 10 seeds in a spathe kind of thing. You collect the spathes from sort of two sources in these donor beds, if that makes sense. We have hand collection, which is you're going out onto the living active bed itself and plucking good spades you find, making sure not to over harvest in certain areas and making sure it's healthy enough. And then you have strandline collection, which is less invasive, but the seeds might not be quite as high quality. Strandline collection being It's often good to do after a storm. It's basically where the high tide line has pushed up a bunch of ripped out plants and seed and spathe material onto the high tide line. Tide recedes, and we go and just pick through a bunch of wash up. Really, it works because you're not trampling, slightly on a bed, but it's tricky. Um, yeah. Next slide, please. So, step two, you've got the seeds. So what I failed to mention is that you have to rot them down first. That being, um, get all the spathes, plant material housing seeds, chuck them into a big plastic tub with water flow and temperature regulation. Um, and the plant material rots away. It's just rotting, really. The seeds are heavy, they sink, so they sink down to the bottom of the tub. You can then go in and harvest them relatively easily. But so you've got your seeds at that point. Then you go to planting. This or what we do usually anyway, you get the seeds, you store them in the fridge about end of November time, you'll be done with them really. Store them at very high salinity and low temperature, which keeps fungal growth off. Then you're good to plant. We do about 50 to 180 seeds per tray. That's what we've been doing over the last couple of years, kind of settling on 180 as our good number. You seem to get the most seagrass for your seed buck. You can see here we experiment with sediment types as well, or sediment sources rather. Sort of slightly darker stuff in that black tray at the bottom of the picture comes from Seaton Snook, I believe, which really got very high germination rates coming out of that. And then the sort of paler stuff in the white tubs is bran sands, which is very similar, to be honest, but slightly different leaf growth ratios. But we're sort of experimenting to find the best source. This year, we're actually going to be planting it a little bit more densely, primarily because we've had a very good seed harvest year, and we need to fit all the seeds in somewhere. So, it's a good problem to have, basically. Yes, so next slide, I think. Just scroll down here to my notes. So you plant your seeds in your trays, and the trays go into our beautiful system here. And you wait. Normally takes about 2 weeks for the first signs of life to start popping up, depending on the temperature you put them in. We're actually in the nursery just seeing our first ones come through now, little white shoots coming out and little leaves. It's very cool. In these kind of systems, as you can imagine, kind of see, you've got pipes going around so the water can keep circulating round and round. We have temperature and light control. Temperature should be between 11 and really no higher than 19 degrees. So in that range somewhere. This is obviously, we have this set up right now. They're at about 17 degrees, I think. Yesterday they were. The water temperature outside is comparably, it's 7.5 degrees at the moment, much colder. We're giving them these fake warm temperatures to sort of trigger germination more effectively. Hey guys, it's summer, start growing. It seems to work. Similarly, light should mimic the day-night cycle. Again, they're getting a little more light than they would be if they were outside, but then they probably wouldn't be germinating. So we want to start it off quickly. Got the lights coming on about 8:30 and finishing about 5:30. And yeah, we've had on average a germination rate around 40% using this kind of nursery setup, which has been really good. Actually, we're really pleased with that. Next slide. So you've grown your plants in the nursery. They've gone to some sort of level of maturity. Now what do you do with them? You try put them out into the estuary. These things you've reared for 3-4 months, cleaning algae off of and worrying about crabs going and nibbling them, and you go put them out in some mud somewhere. It's kind of terrifying. But find a suitable site. It is tricky. Everything has to be perfect. They're fairly hardy plants, but they can't be too shallow. They can't be too deep. They can't be too dark. They can't have too many predators. You got to keep away human disturbance. This is the tricky bit, as you'll see in a sec. Next slide, please. So to sort of run through our transplanting and our outplanting trials. First one we had before my time was at Northgate. Pretty mad landscape, as you can see. Very heavy industry in the background, but we like this kind of sand. It's good sand. Um, we used Hessian seed sacks, which was kind of the really popular method a couple of years ago. It's still good, but that was it. It was the main thing back then. It was how many was it? It was 400 bags of seagrass. Seagrass seeds, little Hessian bags about that big, planted at 10-meter intervals along four transect lines. Those transect lines literally being lines of biodegradable rope, sort of laid across the bottom of the seafloor, using divers for this. Um, Fortunately, which may have been, in hindsight, shouldn't have done this planting in September. We put them in, and then about a week later, the first winter storm hit really badly, and massively altered sediment flow in this sort of lagoonal area they were in, and buried all the bags as far as we could see, just gone. So that was lesson learned. Very annoying, very unlucky, but that's fine. Next slide, please. So the second try we had on again, just about before my time. Seaton snook, which is where our favourite sediment source comes from. We used Hessian seed sacks, so similar to the previous one I just talked about, but this time intertidally rather than subtidally. It didn't need to use divers, which made it easier. And seed injection, which is a sort of slurry of sediment and seeds in essentially a corking gun, really, injected into the sand, and transplanted seedlings being little baby plants, really. These seeds are planted in a half a hectare trial plot in the lower intertidal zone, so almost subtidal. Something I'd like to point out here, you'll notice there's lots of cockles all around the sand here. Now, from the Seagrass Symposium I recently attended, we learned that in really high numbers, cockles can disturb seagrass and are bad for them. Their sort of burying and shuffling around movements can break too many roots, cause them a lot of stress, and end up with them getting washed away because they lose all their anchor points. But in low to medium numbers, they're actually really beneficial. They provide sort of sediment oxygenation. I can never say the word right. In the sediment and nutrient mixing through their movements, which is really good. As to whether this site has the correct number of cockles, not entirely sure. But this second try didn't work either. It's a little more confusing as to why this didn't work. It's sort of a mix of factors, we think. No seedlings survived, and we had no germination of the seeds in both the sort of seed methods. Now, the seedlings likely went out too young. They have neither the dormancy protection of seeds, which can germinate when it's right for them, nor the sort of energy stores and toughness of mature plants. So they didn't work out very well. And then for the other ones, the seed sacks and seed injections, we had a lot of bait digging, which is well, our hobby people take up, is that they go and dig around in the mud here and get cockles and other little things out for fishing. And as you can imagine, that kind of digging very disruptive to seeds trying to germinate. Maybe could have engaged a little more here, but again, easier said than done. And we think with the direct seed injection, we also had a problem of the sediment potentially not matching quite right, meaning that when the tide came over and the water washed over, because it was a different consistency, this plug of sediment, the water probably washed it straight out or washed around it and then washed it out. Either way, bad for the seeds. So it's sort of a mix of maybe not too good methods and outside factors as well. But we keep coming on to the next slide. This is the third tray. I was here for this one. This was at Greetham Creek, which was a really, really interesting site. It's part of a flood realignment scheme, which is 8 years old now, I think, where the Environment Agency broke some flood defences, some very old flood defences, on purpose, allowing the estuary to reclaim some areas of, sort of disused agricultural fields. Um, this worked very well in that it created a lot of new intertidal mudflat habitat. It's done really, really well. It's actually quite weird if you're there and digging around like we clearly were. If you put your hand in about a foot deep, you find the terrestrial sediment again. It's just sort of slimy intertidal mud and then a hard layer. So potentially that layer really good for seagrass, and it really intrigued us because no one had done sort of seagrass restoration as far as we're aware on a completely new area of intertidal mudflat. So we went in this time with mature plants in a turf approach. We dug sort of divots in the mud that were sized correctly for the sort of slabs of turf we had. You just slotted them in there. We put out 25 of these turf units, about 20 by 30 centimeters, into a 25 meters squared area. Sort of see it demarcated by the green flags there. And then we left it. Unfortunately, upon returning over the next few weeks, we saw a complete dieback of all the leaves. This could be for many, many reasons. Heavy predation pressures. We know there's a lot of we see a lot of washed up sort of dead crabs there. So maybe they're in there eating it. Overly turbid waters mean it's just too dark and they can't photosynthesize correctly. But in sort of my personal opinion, I think it was a combination of we planted around some spring low tides, so we could access a lower area of the mud. But at the same time as those spring lows, we had a massive heat wave in June, and we think it just dried out on low tide. It really, really hot. I actually think that this combination of spring lows and heat waves might be very bad for seagrass in general in the UK, but we'll see. We are holding out hope, however. Seagrass beds have been known to disappear effectively for 2 years even, and then pop back up because they have sort of dormant rhizomal matter in the sediment, and when the cues are right, they pop back up using their energy. And we're hoping they're going to do that come sort of next month or something like that, if we're lucky enough. Should work, so fingers crossed. But next slide, please. So over all these sort of failures and vague, missteps, we've learned a lot, which I think is really important to share. So firstly, site selection, it cannot be understated how important it is. They can reveal potentially like disastrous contextual elements of a site, from massive frequent human disturbance to hordes of green crabs that will eat your seagrass. Again, from the symposium, I heard a tale of a crab being caught on camera, walking through a seagrass bed and just plucking the plants out. Wasn't even eating them, just went from don't know why. Surveying also allows for really accurate baseline data, both pre and post restoration work, to see what benefits you may have conferred to the site. On a more technical side, you can look at nutrient levels, depth ranges, turbidity measurements, stuff like that, which can have a really important role. You can, if you have a window of measurements is correct, you can look for a site with them. Or conversely, if you plant in a site and you know what those measurements are and it doesn't work out, or it does work, you can inform later work based on that. Also, as I sort of hinted at before, huge engagement, always really, really important. If in our second trial of outplanting, we had maybe better engaged with the sort of the bait digging community, could have avoided some sort of seed destruction. But then again, that might not have been the case anyway, and that is easier said than done. On to the next slide, please. So had sort of negatives and the stuff we've tried and hasn't worked, but we've also had some really good successes, primarily in the nursery, which is called TERI. It's the Tees Estuary Restoration Initiative. And one thing we're quite proud of is our seagrass cakes. So these came about because we were relatively limited in our seed numbers, our seed stock last year, for planting into our TERI nursery. especially because we knew we were already planning on, losing a third of our stock at Greetham. Either it was going to survive or it was going to die. Either way, it wasn't going to contribute seeds or plants to our nursery. So we had to take that into consideration. Because of this, we tried this new stock boosting method, making a seagrass cake. To do this, you take a perfectly good tray of seagrass and you cut it into 8 squares. You take 4 of those cubes out, put into a fresh new tray lined with your nice Hessian, and then you fill the vacant holes in the spaces in between the cubes. Got to make sure the sediment is the same or very compatible. That is important. And then seagrass spreads out. It grows. This works because it grows rhizomally, sort of like the root growth. If anyone has grown strawberries, they do the same thing, so they can sort of sneak through the sand. This has worked wonders, really, really good, doubled our stock essentially. Although this year we're going to aim to do it about a month earlier, that being doing it in May, to give them a little more time to actually rhizomally grow even more. But yeah, can recommend this. Next slide, please. So sort of onto the seeds. I've had a really good year for this. Sort of, I'll just point out a little flower in the top corner, seagrass flower, very cool. So despite again losing a third of our nursery crop to the outplanting at Greetham, which as in those plants never gave us any seeds to use, we really moved forward in our seed production this year. 2023 we had 77 seeds produced from the nursery. 2024 1,500. This year 15,000 ish. It's really good. So to sort of give you a vague idea, both in 2024 and 2025, we planted around 3,000 seeds in our nursery both of those years, a little more in 2025. But in 2025, we've shown a really clear improvement in seed results. And very simultaneously, which is lovely, we've had really good harvests from the donor beds we go to, that being Lindisfarne again, and we've gone to 2 new Scottish sites this year, which have been really good for us. And the sort of wide variety of seed sources and various successes have propped us up to about 27,000 seeds in storage now, which is really nice. But sort of why is this? We've got a lot of guesses. So essentially better germination rates, and when I say rates, I mean both seeds spawning and when those seeds do germinate, them just growing better as well. From improved methods, we haven't actually changed anything. We're still planting the same, but we've had staff who've been doing it year on year now, so just upskilled really in the planting and in the care of the plants as well, cleaning the algae off, not breaking them. Just skilled labor, I guess. We've also got better harvesting of seeds. So we've got the harvesting of the donor beds, which we've had more donor beds now, so that's good. We've also I invented a weird sieving process, whereby so we have the seagrass tubs. They are grown in larger, big outdoor tubs, which hold the seawater for the trays to be placed into. Now the seeds we grow, like all seagrass seeds, are heavy. They fall out, and turns out a lot of them end up in the bottom of these big outdoor tanks. Previously, we were just, every time we'd have to clean one of these tanks, we'd take all the tub of seagrass out, clean the sides, and wash everything down the drain, because it's mainly algae, gunk, and sort of, not very nice things. But I thought maybe there's a lot of seeds in there, and we started running it through every time through basically a kitchen sieve, really, and got us over 5,000 seeds from that. It's a bit of an estimate because we weren't counting it properly because we didn't think it would work this well. But that's done really, really nicely for us. We've also got maybe better sediment. We harvest from slightly different sources every time, so maybe we've got some better sediment. With that, almost certainly a better microbial community we got there now. It's sort of known in research that microbial communities are important for all plants, but specifically seagrass. It's people have studied it. It's good, and we've had sediment now hosting seagrass, and that same sediment's been in the nursery for 5 years now. So theoretically it's accumulated some kind of microbial advantage, perhaps. Um, Now, the other interesting thing, which I know through Project Seagrass, I know their stuff is doing, they've had people look at it. We're in our third generation now. There's been seeds that have grown up and produced seeds for us three times in the nursery, and they are they're very good at quickly adapting to certain conditions. So we think they're probably adapting to our nursery conditions. The lighting regime, the water temperature, and the quality, and everything, which is allowing them to produce more seeds and be less stressed by any sort of stresses we have in there, which we think we actually quite like them doing that. Again, we have no donor bed to tamper with their genetics, and they're probably just adapting to the conditions that they're going to be planted into anyway. We run a system whereby the seawater comes straight from the dock, pumped across our plant, and then back out again. There's no real tinkering around there, the temperatures or anything. So they get all natural treatment. So theoretically, the seeds and the plants are adapting to the sea conditions they will be one day planted into, which is really hopeful, really good. Yeah, on to the next slide, please. So what's next? 2026. Right. So we're thinking of a site called South Gare, in sort of like, see with the cursor just in that picture there. Now, most issues with our previous planting regimes have stemmed in some way from the intertidal nature of what we're doing. Again, we had that one subtidal one, but a massive storm came in, which, what you can do about that. Well, actually, no, we will do something about that. So intertidal nature, we've had bait digging problems, we've had storms with excessive heat. So we're going to go subtidal. We're going to use Zostera marina seeds from the nursery planted into bags. You can see in that picture there. These are going to grow full mature plants in the nursery, and then those bags housing mature plants are going to go into South Gare here, subtidally, critically. Hopefully, the islands just offshore will protect these plants from the rough seas, which is the one sort of thing we're worried about doing subtidal planting, like we had last time. But these are really proper islands. At super low tides, you can actually walk the whole length of that. And I've been down there on stormy seas, and it's almost, well, it's not flat, but it's almost flat behind the island. We've done a lot of surveys there for water quality measurements and turbidity and everything, and it's looking really promising. So honing on the bag technique, other organizations, including ourselves, have seen limited success in areas with bags. Some of it works, some of it hasn't. We think the ones where they haven't worked are due to poor seed germination inside the bags, that being they're struggling to get through the Hessian physically. And the theoretically anoxic environment inside these bags is maybe not good for them either. We also think a specific problem these bags might create is when a plant can get through, it will grow, and then the Hessian might move separately to the sediment inside the bags, just guillotining the seagrass plant, really. So our way around doing this, one, we're going to be growing plants in these, not just putting the seeds out. And as you can see, the Hessian's been sliced in 10 places. Sort of, we call them sausage rolls for now. And the seeds are planted in holes directly underneath those slices, which means theoretically easier germination out of the bag because they haven't got to poke through Hessian directly. And none of that guillotining I described earlier. Another issue with bags we think happens a lot is bags rolling around in the sea, flipping over, crushing the plants, putting them in darkness, killing them. Our way of getting around this, when we have divers going out and planting these, they're going to sort of create them little divots in the sand for them to sit into, half bury them, obviously not burying the plants, and using bamboo, obviously biodegradable stakes, sort of into each side of the bag to secure it into the sediment a lot better. And again, this should be a pretty low energy environment anyway, so we're hoping it shouldn't be a problem. Following the hopeful success of these bags, essentially if they germinate and grow, we are looking to reinforce this site with more seeds and more plant in the next sort of yearly cycle, if it works, which it should. Additionally, following our really good seed harvest this year, we're going to be planting a lot more seeds in our nursery, more densely. We're essentially going to be at max capacity really for seeds and seagrass plants rather. And then we'll hopefully produce even more seeds to use in 2027 and maybe run out of space for them, but we'll find a way around that. Yeah. Final slide, please. Which is just a goodbye. Any questions? That photo is the first seed we've had germinated in the nursery this year, which is quite exciting. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. That was absolutely fascinating there. A really good talk. It was nice to see so many successes coming out of Terry as well. Really good to see there. So it looks like you're just going from strength to strength, really. So looking forward to the day that we see it on the shores at Hartlepool and the rest of the teas there. It's fingers crossed for next year there. So I'm gonna jump straight in, and we've got a whole load of questions already. So just as a reminder for folks, we've got a little Q&A function there. Feel free to pop your questions into that, or if you'd like to ask a question yourself, then feel free to raise your hand there as well. But for now, I will start off with a question. So, we've got one from Susanna here asking, is seagrass evergreen or does it die back in the winter?
Very, very good question. Uh, so I'll go into a bit of depth here because
Hmm.
seagrass is very phenotypically and genetically confusing. To be honest, there's a lot of variation within single species. Zostra marina, which is our big stuff we primarily grow, um, generally is either on a yearly or a two yearly cycle. In that the yearly cycle ones produce seeds every year, the 2 year ones produce seeds every 2 years. And every winter, at least the annual stuff which we grow and we see, it does die back over winter. And then the root mass shoots some back up. But it's a little more again, I can tell you in the nursery right now, we've had weirdly a few plants sitting outdoors in the outdoor tanks all winter. Most of them have died back. Some of them, one of them actually sent up a flower last month, and the water was 5 degrees. I don't know why it did that. It doesn't make any sense. It should do that in summer. But especially naturally, in sort of natural areas with wave action, we don't have a wave maker. They will die back over winter. They lose a lot of their energy. Then, like you can very easily pluck them out accidentally, and waves will do that, and they'll die back. And theoretically shoot out new shoots come the spring. We've tried to do that a little bit a couple times each year. Put out a tray of what was old root mass, and they don't seem that good at doing it. But that might be because we're harvesting all the seeds off those plants that we've grown, and they're not dropping seeds onto their own feet, I guess. But yeah, they do die back.
Magic. And Susanna has a few questions for us, and they're all very, very good. So let's move on to the next one there. So, again, roughly how long is it from planting a seed to the resulting plant producing seeds of its own?
Seed. I'll work this out. So we plant. So we plant January, early January most times. You get germination within 3 weeks. They're sort of they're finished. Well, not finished growing. They're established in size. 2 months from so Jan, Feb, all of Jan, all of Feb. So that's like early March. We tend to move them outside. That's when they're a bit stronger and bigger. And then you start seeing seeds June, July, August, sort of late August to early September. We tend to find seeds start happening, but it's a the last seeds we were harvesting were in November. So it's a window, but you get a big burst around sort of September time, end of summer.
Nice, they're pretty quick in reproducing there. So within the year, 8, 9 months there, that's
Yeah, they get that nice warm period of energy, get it all going.
it's impressive from them. So it is. So asking here, can you adjust conditions in the nursery to mimic South Gear conditions to hopefully improve survival rates?
Yeah, I mean, so well, this is one reason we like our system of not um growing the plants in what's essentially just seawater pumped in from the dock, going around the plants and going out. It's not getting any special nutrient treatment or temperature treatment or anything. What we can't mimic so well is massive tidal swell, storm inputs. I'm not going to put loads of crabs in there, which might be in self care. So we can mimic it as much as we can, but not all the way. Basically, just by sheer sort of practical limitation.
I'm going to come back to you, Susanna, with the rest of your questions, but I'm going to mix things up a little bit. And we're going to move on to, we've got a question here from Bruce asking quite nicely, how did you get into this sort of work?
How did I get? Where did it all go wrong? I did marine biology at uni, Exeter. Sort of blue planet slash Octonauts generation. Um, then I mean, relatively recently completed sort of a traineeship with the Tees Rivers Trust, doing this stuff, and then stepped into the role above which I am now. Um, yeah, I think I was always weirdly into snails, and there's lots of snails on seagrass. So yeah.
That's true. There is plenty of snails out there. Absolutely. It'll pique your interest while you're out on the field work there. So we've got a question here. Let's go to Neil next, asking, your seat and snook slides seem to show significant traces of sea coal. Is the presence of that coal along Northeast a factor that might negatively affect success of your seagrass reintroduction project?
Very nicely noticed. We actually spent a little while. I assume you're talking about the sort of satellite shot. Um, we actually spent a little while debating what that was from the satellite view, and then we did realize it was the coal dust. We've been debating this. Um, it's not. Uh, it's relatively inactive, really. It might even help by sort of absorbing some nutrients, something like that, and it may help in that it gives the soil, not soil, gives the sand some sort of good qualities. But I mean, I think whatever it does, we're going to have to live with it somewhat, because if we want to get seagrass growing in here, it's going to have to deal with that. It's everywhere.
No, that's fair enough there. I'm going to nip back to Susanna for a question. So, wondering, what is the capacity of the nursery?
um, we're
For you there.
so we're gonna have. Oh, right, let me get the numbers up my head. Um, gonna have those trays, which are a little over 30 by 20 centimeters. Um, we're gonna have about no, um, 250 of those, I believe. No, sorry, 150 of those, 160 of those, I believe. Um, and each of those will have um, 200 seeds in each, something like that, sort of various stocks divided up amongst the trays. Um, so yeah, we're going to be putting in about 19,000 ish seeds into the nursery this year, and that's kind of hitting capacity. That capacity is caused by like we're going to do the cake splitting thing again. So we'll have about 80 trays, which are going to then turn into about 160 trays. Which is going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be good because all of those are going to make more plants and produce 1 million seeds for even next year, which God knows what happens then. But yeah, so we're kind of at capacity.
You're going to be kept on your toes this year, then, that's for sure. So, a question here from Leonie asking, where did you collect the seed in Scotland, and was there any difference in the germination rates, or was there any difference between those Scottish plants and the Lindisfarne plants?
So I actually I couldn't make the Scotland collection this year, which I was quite sad about. But it was two places called Longman and Udale. I couldn't actually tell you where in Scotland they are. It was the other members of the trust that went and did it. I was very jealous. As for germination rates wise, they are in just about starting to germinate now. We have some Scottish trays and some sort of Lindisfarne seeds going on at the same time. Um, if you email me in a month or two, I'll let you know the numbers.
Perfect. I think you deal there. I'm sure it was the Cromarty Firth up by Inverness that was collected from there,
Yes, yes, that's
which,
right.
funnily enough, we will actually be having someone doing a talk next week about their work in that exact area. So stick around for
Oh,
that one there.
is that Mossy Earth?
Yes, that's Catherine Gemmell, director of Murray Ocean Community there, working with them. Yeah. So
Cool.
our next question, we've got an anonymous one here. Are there any opportunities to volunteer and help with the field work or the lab work being done for those wanting to get experience with seagrass restoration?
Yes, yes, there is much. Please do come. We're actually sort of kicking off a big volunteer drive at the moment. That's my sort of engagement co-worker runs that. But feel free to send me or indeed Judy an email about that. Over the year, we're going to have seagrass seed planting, volunteering that needs doing, and sort of general maintenance of the plants, like cleaning and sort of welfare. We're going to have volunteers be doing the sort of the monitoring, which is the sort of indoor tanks, is light levels, water quality, temperature, all that kind of stuff, data measuring growth rates and germination rates, and compiling statistics out of that. There's a lot going on. Can recommend. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you for that one. And then another question here. Uh, oh, that's quite interesting. Can you put some sea coal dust into the sediment trays in the nursery to find out if it has any effects, good or bad? So, do you do any experimentation within Terry to sort of look at how different sediments, different substrates might impact on that seagrass?
That's a very good idea. Do you know what? I just might try try. I'll put down try a coal
Hey,
tray.
crowd
Yeah.
crowdsourcing those projects for you. Brilliant.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, give it a go. Why not?
Ideal. Yeah, tune in next year, folks. We'll find out the answers there. We've got two more questions, both here coming from Susanna, who first of all wants to know, have there been successes with planting seagrass out in situ elsewhere around the UK?
Um, yes, yes. Especially if you're talking sort of like transplant to plant.
Mm.
I know what were they called? There's a project up in Scotland. Sea Wilding had success recently. They took seagrass plants, not sort of full mature adults, but not seedlings either, sort of medium-sized ones, I think they were. And with a lot of volunteer hours, got them very delicately out of their sediment. So they're just plant and root mass. And then tied them along long ropes at little intervals, just tying the roots around, very delicate work, and then put steel washers on each of those sort of tied bits along the knot, and then went out subtidally and put that sort of as an extension to their existing donor bed, which
Mhm.
saw really the sort of donor bed leaped out and sort of colonized that whole area where they were outplanting because of their outplanting, which is really good. Um, the steel, apparently, I asked the guy. I considered why would you do that? Isn't rust bad for them? But I learned from that it can actually be quite good. It gives some sort of chemical reaction stuff where it combats bad sulfur levels, I think it was. So yeah, there has been success. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. That's the technique that we're actually going to be attempting tomorrow. So that's good to know that we're onto a winner with that one. Fabulous. And our final question here for the evening, asking, Would it be good to stress the maturing plants a bit with wave motion to encourage root growth, thinking of windy terrestrial habitats have better roots than those in less exposed situations? Do you think that's maybe a capacity that Terry might build into the future, looking at creating these sort of different sea states, basically?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's we're sort of constantly battling with our pump like sort of mechanisms to try and increase flow in the tanks. But we are actually we're considering somewhat of a system change up for next year, which I won't spoil too much, but may involve some sort of wavy creations. Because you're right, yeah, a little bit of stress would be good and could keep the algae off a little better. But again, yeah, you got to hit that balance of stressing enough to make them hardy, but also not just nuke all your plants. But yeah,
Ideal. Thank you very much for that, Joe. So I think that's the last of our questions there. So you are now off the hook. But I'd just like to say again a huge thank you. That was absolutely fascinating. I think everyone in the chat's singing your praises there as well. So they've really enjoyed that talk tonight. So there we go. Absolutely brilliant there. So I would just like to say again, yeah, a huge thank you very much to yourself, Joe, for coming along, and a huge
no
thank
worries.
you to all our audience as well there. It's been absolutely magic. And I'll just wrap up by saying that we have our final talk of the series next Tuesday evening, same time, same place. And that will be coming from Catherine Gemmell, who is director of the Murray Ocean Community Group. And we'll be exploring, bringing along that sort of theme, looking at the seagrass as well, but looking at how communities are actually taking action to bring back seagrass within their own areas, which will be quite exciting to see. So, again, that seagrass bit a little bit more of a community engagement focus instead there. So I will say a good evening to you all, and I hope to see you again next week. And thank you again, Joe. You've been absolutely magic.